All right, everybody, welcome back to the Horn Takes podcast. I'm your host, Sean Redfern. Today we thought we weren't planning on doing a podcast today. We weren't planning on doing a show, but in light of the MLB Draft, we figured we'd go ahead and have an extra show this week. So this is episode 62. We'll be talking all about the MLB Draft, how it affects Texas baseball for 2024. Some last-minute Texas baseball staff updates before we head into the 2024 season, and then the final state of the program address for 2023. So we probably won't talk much baseball for the rest of the season. It's all going to be about football, or rather, for the rest of this year, it's all going to be about football. Before we get started, check us out on Twitter at Horn Takes, TikTok at Horn Takes. If you're watching this live on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe, please. Appreciate that. It helped me out. We'll be working on all kinds of cool content. We've been talking about the Traveling Road Show. We're going to go on the road, show y'all what it's like to be at some of these big-time football games that the University of Texas is playing at this year. We'll be in Tuscaloosa. We'll be at the Red River Shootout at the State Fair, which is always a good time. And then we'll head down to Austin for the Texas Tech game. It'll probably be the final time Texas and Texas Tech square off in football, at least for the foreseeable future. I'm sure at some point there could be some out-of-conference matchups between those two. But it'll be a while, I'm sure. Let's get into this MLB draft. So I think the big storyline, everybody knows it. LSU did very well. Paul Skeens, Dylan Cruz become the first collegiate teammates ever to go 1-2, and they may be the first teammates ever at any level to go 1-2. Very impressive. What's even more interesting about the fact that LSU had the number 1, the number 2, and I want to say Ty Floyd went 38th, which was in some sort of the first round of the MLB draft is kind of interesting, kind of weird. I appreciate that, Texas Savage Gang. There's like these supplemental weird things at the end of the first round that technically count as the first round. Not exactly sure. I'll have to dig into that a little more. But that's where Ty Floyd went. If you guys don't remember, Ty Floyd really had a hell of a College World Series for LSU. And then just to sort of add, I guess, some icing to the top of the LSU really early MLB draft was a kid named Grant Taylor, went 51st overall and never even threw a pitch in 2023. So the LSU Tigers were a wicked good roster heading into this last season. And what's kind of interesting is even with all that firepower, there was some touch and go moments for them in the College World Series. And I think that's just a testament to how really good the final 8 teams that make it to Omaha typically are. I guess another interesting thing is the number 1 overall pick in the draft didn't even have to pitch at all in the championship series, yet his team still managed to win the College World Series. So I can't argue with any of those picks. I think at the top you're probably splitting hairs and you're looking at needs. Dylan Cruz for a long time was the, sort of unanimous best player in the country. And then late Skeens kind of scooped in and started to get some of the first round overall pick type attention, I guess. Anyway, this has prompted this whole LSU business, this national championship, and this really successful first day of the MLB draft has prompted more LSU as the mecca of college baseball talk on my TikTok page, which I have a ton of respect for LSU. So just a little backstory. Some guy came on one of my TikTok videos a couple weeks ago, right after the national championship, right after the College World Series was over, and made a comment about, and it was a video of me just congratulating LSU on winning the national championship. So there was no digs or anything like that at LSU. This guy jumps on and says how LSU is the mecca of college baseball. And then there was hundreds of other comments similar. They're the greatest program of all time. Da 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 da. And I saw this one that said Mecca, and it made me crack up, like literally laugh out loud. So I responded to it. I did a video and I said, man, you guys need to chill out and just enjoy your national championship. And of course, that started a feud because I said, I said that LSU is not the best program in college baseball, like historically, right? I got a lot of negative feedback for that. Started a little LSU fan feud. First of all, Mecca is a place. It's not a program. So like if I was going to talk about the Mecca of college baseball, I would talk about Omaha in the College World Series, because that's, Mecca is the place where the Muslims travel to. It's like their holy place, right? Well, for college baseball fans, Omaha and the College World Series is our holy place. That's where we will all want to go. That's where we, hopefully at the end of the season, you're one of the top 8 teams left and your fan base can travel to Mecca in Omaha and watch those games. So first of all, you're using the word Mecca wrong. Secondly, I think there's 3 teams in this discussion, and I've done some content on this, but I'll break it down for you guys listening or doing live, watching the live right now. There's 3 teams I feel like that are in the discussion when you talk about the greatest teams in college baseball history. I think you have to talk about USC because they have the most titles, and it's not even close. They're sitting at 12. The problem with USC is they haven't been to a College World Series in almost a quarter of a century. And then you've got LSU, who's got the second most titles at 7, and tons of recent success. But if you look at their program historically, it hasn't been, a consistently highly rated program. It certainly has been that way for the last, I don't know what, 20, 25 years, which is why I think it's fair to add them into the discussion. Texas, 3rd in national titles, 6 overall, 1 right behind LSU, and historically the most consistent program in college baseball at reaching the Mecca of college baseball, which is not a program, LSU fans. It's a place, and that place is Omaha. And what we're going there for is the College World Series, and Texas has been 38 times. So again, you look at those 3 teams, and I think it's impossible to pick one and say this is the best team, because they all clearly have advantages in certain places or the other. There's really no one best team in college baseball, just like there's really no one best historically team in college football. It's kind of a dumbass argument, to be perfectly honest. So LSU fans, just enjoy that national championship. They're hard to get. Back to the draft, the Rangers take Wyatt Langford at number 4. I only mentioned that because I'm a Rangers fan. I really like Wyatt Langford. He owns the 2 longest home runs in College World Series history. Both of them were bombs up onto the concourse. I don't know if you guys have ever been to, Charles Schwab Field now. Last time I was there, it was TD Ameritrade. Hitting the ball up on the concourse is a blast. We're talking 450 feet, 460 feet. I mean, it's a bomb. So really, really excited about that pick. If you notice, we've talked about LSU and we've talked about Florida. 19 of the first 39 picks in this draft were either from SEC schools or committed to SEC schools. And if you look at sort of the draft through day 2, that trend really continues. You see just a ton of guys getting drafted out of the SEC, the ACC as well. The Big 12 had a rough first day with only 1 drafted, but picked up a little steam on day 2. So I talk about the SEC only to say that Texas is headed to the SEC, and it's going to be a little part of this discussion further on down the road today. Another interesting tidbit, Texas on a 59-year streak of having a player drafted. Texas has had, you want to talk about blue bloods and consistency, and this one is absolutely amazing to me. Every year that there has been an MLB draft, Texas has had a player drafted in that MLB draft. Now that's phenomenal. I mean, that is absolutely crazy. So hook 'em horns. So let's talk a little bit about how this MLB draft kind of affected Texas baseball going into the 2024 season. So on our last real baseball podcast or baseball show, we talked about some guys that are kind of on the edge of heading, some guys we thought were probably going to get drafted high enough that they'd move on, and some guys that we kind of thought were on the bubble for that. And our opinions varied from a lot of other people's opinions on this topic. So we'll just break it down a little bit. Travis Sakura, probably the gem of Texas's 2023 recruiting class. Big 6'4", 240, 6'6" rather, 240-pound kid out of Round Rock, Texas, right-handed pitcher. At one point, he was considered a probable first rounder. He ended up falling to the third round, but he still got drafted high enough that he's probably not coming to Texas. This kid had a 7-0 record there at Round Rock High School, 108 Ks. That's pretty amazing too for a high school pitcher. 0.84 ERA, 100+ mile-an-hour fastball. Working on that slider to go along with that fastball. Some people thought if he fell far enough, for those of you that don't know, and I don't know all the details behind it, I just started to kind of learn a little bit about this year. The MLB draft is interesting in a lot of ways, but one of the more interesting ways that one of the bigger ways that it's more interesting than some of the other drafts is most of the other drafts have like a number value, like a monetary value associated with each pick in the draft. And what MLB baseball has is what they call slots. And it carries sort of the same format you'd think of with the NFL draft, where, the number one overall pick, the slot value is X, and then the second overall pick is a little bit less, and so on and so forth, all the way down the line. So I'm not quite sure why they do it that way. I suspect it has something to do with just the multiple ways that players can be drafted. You've got guys that get drafted out of high school. You get guys that get drafted out of other countries that have never played for a high school, more than likely. You got guys that are at JUCO schools where the rules are different than the D1 schools. And then you got the D1 schools, the D2 schools, etc. The 4-year schools, let's call them. So the way you can draft these guys is just multiple different ways, and guys can get drafted multiple times. And it's kind of a mess the way MLB draft is. But so I assume that's why they have these money slots. So there was some thought that maybe Sakura would fall far enough rather, that his slot value wouldn't be in the right range for what he wanted to sign out of high school. Therefore, he would go to Texas. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's probably going to sign where he's at. I think the Nationals supposedly, this is just from what I've read, have done a really good job of setting money aside for this draft. So they have the money to sign their first 2 picks plus Sakura. So it looks like there's a very small likelihood he winds up. And I'll tell you this, folks, I don't know how long these guys have to decide what they're going to do. I don't know. I don't know how fast that happens. The signing of their draft picks and what that whole process looks like. I'm just not real sure. So it'll be interesting to see. Sakura's I feel like he's gone. We'll see. He hasn't signed yet, as far as I know. So I guess there's always hope. Dylan Campbell, another guy. Dylan Campbell's a guy I thought that would get drafted high enough and probably wouldn't come back. But then his dad mentioned running it back in a tweet like a couple of weeks after the season. And I don't know if that was just pandering to the fan base. I have no idea. But it kind of left the door open, right, for Dylan Campbell to possibly come back, which would be huge for Texas. He was drafted 136th overall by the Dodgers. That's the 4th round pick. Kendall Rogers of D1 Baseball is reporting that it looks like he's going to sign and move on, and I don't blame him. There's only there's only so much development you can get at the collegiate level. I think that college baseball, sort of the perception of college baseball has changed a ton over the last probably decade and a half in terms of how Major League Baseball teams view college players. But I still think, Dylan Campbell's been there, what, 3 years? I don't know that there's much more he can do to improve himself, improve his draft stock at least. At some point you're just kind of what you are, right? And I think Dylan Campbell is what he is, which was a 4th-round draft pick, which is really good. Lucas Gordon was drafted 179th to the White Sox. That's the 6th round. Odds he'll be back, I don't think they're very good. And Kendall Rogers of D1 Baseball is reporting that he expects Lucas Gordon to sign. Will Gasparino was a kid, 2023 commit, 44th player in the country, number 6 outfielder, really big kid, 6'6", 215 pounds. This guy has big time pop off the bat. We're talking almost 100-mile-an-hour exit velo in high school. And the other thing about him is he's fast. This is a center fielder. This is a really athletic kid, and to be as big as he is and that athletic is kind of scary. It's kind of a departure from what we've seen from Texas baseball players, which is not to say that Texas baseball players or Texas baseball rosters haven't had sort of some of these physically imposing type players. But it's been a while, and it's very few and far between. But this kid definitely fits the bill. He did not get drafted at all at this point. There's still, 9 rounds today, I think. 11 through 20 are today. So I think he'll probably get drafted, but I think yesterday was sort of his target. Somewhere yesterday was where he wanted to go, and was kind of the decision he had made previous, which is, if I go by X, I'll consider it. If I don't, let's go to Texas. And he tweeted out Texas baseball, let's ride, yesterday. So I think the odds that Will Gasparino ends up on campus are very high at this point, which is a solid thing for Texas baseball. Another guy, Casey Borba, the 153rd ranked player in the country, 7th ranked third baseman in the country, 6'1", 205. I think this is probably a corner guy, like a third baseman, first baseman, with a lot of pop in his bat. He's another guy that Texas fans were kind of on the fence about, in terms of, does this guy get drafted, or is he going to wind up at Texas? He's not been drafted yet. I think he's going to wind up coming to Texas. So those were the two sort of commitments at this point that were possibly going to move on to professional baseball if they were drafted high enough. They didn't get drafted where they wanted to go. Well, they haven't got drafted at all yet, but they're probably going to get drafted. They just won't get drafted where they wanted to go. They're going to wind up at Texas. A couple other guys, and I'm excited about these. Tanner Witt, pitcher, had a really awesome freshman year for the University of Texas, true freshman year. Pitched a great game against Tennessee in an elimination game in that 2021 College World Series, where they played for the final in their bracket. Tanner Witt's the guy that had his UCL issue just a few games into the season last year, had Tommy John surgery, came back late in this year. I think he had 4 starts, maybe 5 starts. Looked good at times, and also looked, pretty bad at times. But he was a guy that a lot of baseball people thought was a top 3 round guy. And I talked a little earlier about differing opinions, and for me, I thought that was odd. Like, people started talking about Tanner Witt was for sure going to get drafted and not be back next year for Texas, and I just thought that was weird, because despite the fact that he's pitched some really good innings for Texas, he hasn't pitched a lot for Texas. And I don't think you ever really know how someone's going to come back from that type of surgery. And again, in really small window of opportunity, he didn't look amazing this last season. So I thought it was odd that people were talking about Tanner Witt as a for sure, absolutely he's going to go. I don't think he's gotten drafted yet. And I think that's best for him. I think it's best for him to come back to Texas, get a complete season under his belt. I'm sure it'll be as a starter. No doubt he has the stuff or had the stuff before his Tommy John surgery, but I think it's important for him to go finish out a complete season at the collegiate level, prove that his arm can withstand that entire season. I think that will improve his draft stock. And then, you know, just prove that the stuff is back. I mean, prior to the injury, Major League Baseball was salivating over this kid, and rightfully so. The stuff was absolutely amazing. I think coming back to Texas and completing a season, proving that stuff is back, is gonna do great things for Tanner Witt. I think Tanner Witt is probably like a first round type talent. I mean, he's the type of guy that you could be talking about at the end of the year, like people were talking about Paul Skeens. Not the exact same type of pitcher, but similar in terms of just being able to go dominate opposing hitters. LBJ, LeBaron Johnson Jr. Man, I really sort of I become very fond of LBJ this season. And I always, even last year in limited action, you could see he had some electric stuff. His fastball's mid-90s. He's got a slider that just completely falls off the table at the last minute. Really tough on hitters. He came in this year. He started out as a midweek starter, and then he moved to a starting role over the weekend, and then he kind of got, for whatever reason, demoted from that. And then he wound up getting back into that starting rotation again and ended up pitching really well. Same guy. I mean, LBJ's game in the regional against Miami was absolutely amazing. Complete game. That's the kind of stuff LBJ can do. He just needs to get a little more consistent. So LBJ was one of those guys that was kind of on the edge as well, on the bubble, so to speak. Really, really amazing. Definitely MLB stuff. Just not sure if MLB teams are interested in drafting him that high, or if he's more of a project. It looks like in their eyes he's kind of a project, or at least they want to see more out of him. So I expect LBJ to be back as well. And again, I think that's the best for him. I think putting together a season as a starter, showing that you can get consistent. I've said it multiple times during the season this season. LBJ, his only problem is between his head. Physically, just it's all there. He's got all the tools to be a big time Major League Baseball player. So if you look at the draft this year, it's kind of like best case scenario for Texas. They had some guys get drafted, which always looks good to recruits. Always looks good for your coaching staff, and from a development perspective, it's something to brag about, right? We got draft picks. People are drafting Texas Longhorns to go play baseball again for the 59th straight time. That's exciting and that's good. But we also kind of lucked out with some of these guys that were bubble guys. They fell a little lower than maybe people originally thought, and it looks like we're going to get those guys back. So I think best case scenario, this draft for Texas happened. Let's talk a little bit about the Texas coaching staff update. So we talked, I don't know, maybe it was like 3 or 4 weeks ago. Woody Williams out right after the season. Woody Williams gets, I don't know if he got fired or just left on his own accord. The report was Texas baseball has parted ways with Woody Williams. Woody Williams was the pitching coach this last season. Only the pitching coach for 1 year. Not sure what to make of that. Here's what I do know. Pierce is going to handle the pitching coach duties as he did as a head coach at Sam Houston and Tulane. He's going to handle that himself. I've been pretty critical of David Pierce in a lot of situations. I don't think you can be critical of him in this situation necessarily. That's what he came up as a pitching coach, and he was a really really good one at Rice. He was there from 2006 to 2011. Over his course of what is that, 5 years, 5 6 years? Over that course of time as him being the pitching coach at Rice, they had 27 pitchers get drafted. 27 pitchers in 5 years. That's pretty damn good. 8 of those guys went in the first 10 rounds. So my only concern with a sort of manager slash head coach, whatever you want to call him, also taking duties such as pitching coach duties is just the strength. It's the same concern I have about Steve Sarkisian being the head coach at the University of Texas for football, but also calling his own plays. I just wonder if it's too much for one human being to handle, too much to do completely effectively. I don't know. We'll see. One thing's for sure, Pierce doesn't have any more people to fire as far as pitching goes. So if the pitching is not good next year, if the pitching is a problem next year, David Pierce has nobody to look at except himself in the mirror. And maybe that's good. Maybe that's good for Texas baseball. We'll see how it works out. One interesting note, Troy Tulowitzki, who was I don't know what his title was a couple of years ago, but he was on the staff a couple of years ago at Texas as a volunteer coach. He is actually returning to the staff for 2024 as the director of player development. This is a non-coaching, non-recruiting role, but this is a role that gets to interact with the players on a daily basis. I'm excited about this one. I thought Troy Tulowitzki was a very big catalyst for the offensive outbreak we saw in 2021. You know, Texas fans have not seen a team hit home runs like that team ever. And I think a lot of that had to do with Troy Tulowitzki. I think he was the batting coach, the hitting coach for Texas. I think that was his official title in round one. Carly Todd, she was the director of player development, which if you go look up what she did, she was a catch-all. She did so many things. And if you're talking about concerns and not being able to do enough, not being able to be effective in all of those areas, I think certainly Carly Todd had too much on her plate. So she's now the director of baseball operations, which makes a lot more sense when you look at what she was actually doing. And now you got a real baseball guy in here as the director of player development. I think this was a good move. So what it looks like, and here's another thing I don't know about college baseball. I'm sure there are certain rules about how many coaches you can actually have on staff, like legit coaches, legit positions. Maybe that's a better way to say, because not all these are coaches. And it looks like what David Pierce did was he said, I'll take the role of head coach / pitching coach. That'll free me up and another position. I can bring Tulowitzki back, make him my director of player development. And I think that's going to work out good. I think the players really love Tulowitzki. He's a 5-time All-Star. This is, even though he can't go out and recruit people, it's a big recruiting tool to say, hey, the guy that's going to be teaching you how to hit and developing you as a hitter and as a fielder and as a baseball player in general, that guy's a 5-time All-Star. Philip Miller, Steve Rodriguez, and Caleb Longley round out the assistant coaches ranks. And those are guys that were there this last season in similar roles. So not a huge mix up, but definitely good to see. I was wondering, I kept seeing, I follow Kendall Rogers on Twitter, and I kept seeing all these posts. So-and-so fired their pitching coach, and now so-and-so's hiring this as their pitching coach over and over and over again. And I'm like, man, nothing on Texas. And they were like the first ones. Woody Williams was kind of like one of the first dominoes to fall this offseason as far as assistant coaches go. So I was kind of wondering what was going to happen. I'm glad something happened. Not sure if it's the best thing. We'll find out, right? Going back to Tulo, it's interesting. A lot of guys a lot of guys, a lot of Texas fans really want him to be the head coach next year. They're excited about, or not next year necessarily, but the next head coach at the University of Texas. I don't know. He obviously knows baseball. He played a lot of baseball. He's really good at baseball. I don't know. He was successful in 2021 in his capacity with the Texas Longhorns. Again, I said I felt like he was a catalyst for a lot of that offensive explosion. Don't know. But being a head coach, I don't know. We'll see what happens. State of the program address. Texas has one more season in the Big 12 before they head off to the SEC, which is obviously, clearly the best conference in baseball this season. Those are going to be some tough. It's going to be a tough road to hoe. And there's some good teams in the Big 12, and historically, the Big 12 has been pretty good at baseball. In some cases, very good at baseball. Some seasons, some seasons the Big 12 has kind of been what the SEC was this year, just absolutely dominant. But it wasn't like that this last season, and it really hasn't been like that in a while. And you look at programs like Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, TCU, Oklahoma, Baylor, not very recently, but in the recent past, all those programs have been to College World Series. Some of those programs have been to a lot of College World Series. So there's generally some pretty good baseball in the Big 12, but it's definitely not the same thing today as what you're going to see moving into the SEC. I think the coaching staff changes are a little concerning for me because I think it means one of two things. I think it means that these coaches, some of these guys don't like to work for David Pierce, and I've heard that. And I haven't heard it from any like official source. But I've heard different people discuss that David Pierce can kind of be a hard guy to play for, a hard guy to work for. I think if you know how you just see somebody talk and you go, man, that guy just seems a little abrasive. I get that sense when I see David Pierce give interviews. He just seems like an abrasive guy. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I think that's how I'm an abrasive guy. So I think a lot of people look at me and go, man, this guy's an asshole. And I think that's fair. So as a asshole, I think it's okay for me to speak and say that David Pierce looks like an asshole. It's probably the case. Or if it's not that he's abrasive, it's not that he's hard to work for, it's not that he's hard to play for. And by the way, it's not just coaches. We've had players that have hit the road. You look at Gavin Cash was a guy that was a freshman on the 2021 team, first baseman. So guess who he was playing behind? Golden Spikes Award winner Ivan Melendez, who, by the way, congratulations to Ivan Melendez, has been promoted to Double-A ball. He's now at the Amarillo Sodbusters, or no, Sod Dogs. I think it's Sod Dogs is the name of this team. I don't know what the hell that means, but it's probably got something to do with prairie dogs or something. I hope that. I think if you're a professional baseball player, there might not be a worse place on the planet to get sent to than Amarillo, Texas. So if I'm Ivan Melendez, my motivation is high to kick ass and get promoted to AAA. But anyway, Gavin Cash, he's not playing in front of Ivan Melendez, and a lot of people are thinking Gavin Cash is going to be the guy that comes in, sort of takes over first base, and then all of a sudden he transfers. He portals out, goes to Tech, has an amazing season at Tech. I don't know why Gavin Cash left. It couldn't have been playing time. There's no way on the planet that someone is that entitled that thinks they should be playing more than 0. which is what he played last year for Texas. When you're playing behind a guy like Ivan Melendez. So the only thing that really makes sense is there was just something about the program that he didn't like. And it could have been other things besides the coach. Another example, though, you got Mitchell Daly, 3-year starter at the University of Texas, has another year of eligibility. He decides he's moving on from the University of Texas. He portals out this season, this offseason, lands at Kentucky. Could have just been he graduated from Texas and he wanted a fresh start. I think it was probably he got benched a bunch at the end of the season. He went like 3 straight weekend series without starting. And to me, that's not rubbing somebody the wrong way. That's David Pierce doing what he thought was right in terms of trying to get a guy snapped out of just an absolute ridiculous slump at the plate. But those things are concerns. When you got players and you got coaches that are just constantly getting reshuffled around, I think it is fair to have concerns about why. And again, a lot of things I've heard have to do with David Pierce and just kind of his personality. We'll see what happens. Maybe David Pierce can keep this staff intact for more than one season. You look at the lineup on this team going forward, you got Jalen Flores at shortstop probably. Jared Thomas at first base, Jack O'Dowd at second base. I feel like those 3 guys are back for sure. You got Porter Brown, Peyton Powell, Garrett Guillemette are all likely returners. Maybe not Porter Brown. Porter Brown participated in senior day. Porter Brown wants to be a doctor. Porter Brown might say, done with baseball. Not sure. Not sure at all. So I think, though, those 3 guys are likely returners. So that's 6 guys that played quite a bit of baseball. I had Dylan Campbell as an outside possibility. I no longer believe Dylan Campbell's an outside possibility. And then you got a group of guys that played quite a, well, I wouldn't say they played quite a bit, but they played some at the University of Texas. Jaden Duplantier, Rylan Galvan, Max Bellew, Kate O'Hare, and Ace Whitehead. Those are all guys that saw a lot. Not a lot. Some of them saw quite a bit of plate action for people that weren't starting last year. And all those guys will be coming back. So really good nucleus of players. It's kind of the opposite of what we saw last year, where Texas had to replace 2/3 of the lineup. Texas had to replace 2/3 of the starting rotation. This season, it looks like we're going to get 2/3 of the starting rotation back. Looks like we're going to get 2/3 of the lineup back. Gasparino's coming in. I think that's a big one. One of the areas we talked about at the end of the season that we needed to find some players was the outfield. I think they still need to find a shortstop. Pitching, Tanner Witt, LBJ. I think this Texas team is in much better shape heading into 2024 than they were in 2023. And I don't think you could argue that. I don't think there's any way you could argue against that. So here's a horn take for you guys. If everyone that comes back now, so if Porter Brown comes back, I think the 3 that we're looking at left that are still maybe up in the air: Tanner Witt, LeBaron Johnson Jr., and Porter Brown. Witt and LBJ for draft reasons, and Porter Brown for just, it's time for me to move on and go to medical school. If those 3 guys can come back, coupled with the 2 guys that are coming in that we thought might be draft guys in the 2023 recruiting class, the horn take is, if those guys come back, Texas has a College World Series final team. Yikes. I said that. I think they'll be a top 10 preseason team for sure. You look at the team last year. Again, really phenomenal job getting that team through a really tough start, finding a little bit of a rhythm, making it to postseason and finding a way to win that regional in Coral Gables, and then just a couple plays away from advancing to their third straight College World Series. I think if you look at what Pierce did with that team, and if you look at the team he probably has coming back, as well as the additions with the 2023 recruiting class, as well as any more possible transfer portal additions, I think Texas baseball is going to have a really good season next season. And again, the horn take is I think they could be a College World Series final team. We'll see. Something you got to think about if you're a Texas fan, something the Texas coaching staff and the athletic department should definitely be thinking about is this team SEC ready? And I'm not sure. To me, what SEC ready, you always talk about SEC ready, and especially since the announcement, from a football perspective, there's tons of comments, tons of, cattiness, whatever you want to call it. Y'all aren't SEC ready. It's kind of an odd catch-all, I guess, but let's talk about if we think Texas baseball is SEC ready from a roster perspective. To me, that just means you got a lot of really high draft picks. You got a bunch of really high prospect guys on your team. You have the ability to bring in some of the top talent in the country from not only a recruiting perspective or from a portal perspective. And I'm not sure Texas is there yet. I if I had to lean one way or the other, I would say I don't think Texas is ready to compete at a high level in SEC conference play right now. The good news is they've got a whole season, a whole other cycle of recruiting, a whole nother cycle with transfer portal to get where they want to be. I think Texas needs to figure out NIL for baseball. They're 10th overall for all Texas sports the last time I saw, which is behind multiple women's sports. And nothing against women's sports, but the two things I care about most at Texas in terms of sports are football and baseball. Baseball has such a huge tradition at the University of Texas. Again, we've talked about it multiple times. One of the most consistent programs in college baseball history. To me, I would argue that Texas baseball is more at the face of Texas athletics than even Texas football. If you're gonna protect a tradition, so you can't have your baseball program be 10th in all of the athletic programs at the University of Texas for NIL mono. That is insane. I don't know what has to happen. If I was super rich, I would fix the problem. I'm not super rich. I'm not even rich. I don't have enough money to fix this problem. But there's people out there that have money to fix this problem. If you know people out there that have money to fix this problem for Texas NIL when it comes to baseball, please, let's get it fixed. I think the other area that Texas needs to improve, and we're talking about the university here, and we're talking about the supporters, the facilities. Like the budget for Texas baseball needs to increase. And I've heard that that's happening. So some of this stuff may already be stuff that's in the works or already got money going to. But we need better facilities. They do have a really, really nice and relatively brand new indoor hitting facility, as well as pitching lab. But I don't think that indoor hitting facility is a hitting lab like LSU has, for example. So let's spend some cash. Let's turn that indoor hitting facility, which is really nice, into a state-of-the-art hit lab. Let's throw some money into the dish. Dish Falk Field, nice place to watch a baseball game. It is by no means a dump. It's a nice baseball park. I think it kind of lacks some charm, especially when you start talking about these SEC stadiums. these environments that these SEC stadiums have. One of the cool things, and I'm kind of embarrassed. I never knew this was a thing, but at Arkansas, they have this whole sort of grassy area out in the outfield that the outfield's kind of built into. And I don't know, I'm assuming people pay for that, but I'm assuming the charge is relatively low. So these people line up before the games to get into this area, and it's like a mad dash when they open the gate. People are like rushing in to get to their spot. They have freaking barbecue grills out there. You can roll a cooler out there. Really cool way to just go watch a baseball game. Sit in the grass, watch a game from the outfield. Don't pay an arm and a leg to go see the game. Get to cook your own food, bring your own drinks in. I think that's cool. Texas doesn't have anything like that. Texas has got two roads going behind their outfield. Now they do have occupy left field, which has got some tailgating up on the hill a little bit. But I think there's an opportunity for Texas to do better. Make that outfield area something cool, something that something you can bring a family to without spending $200 on food and tickets and all that stuff. I think, again, you look at a lot of these SEC stadiums and they look like minor league parks. The SEC schools chunk a ton of money into their baseball programs, and it shows. It not only shows in the facilities, but it shows in the type of players they're able to recruit. You see all these guys that are portaling out of these SEC schools. They're not going outside of the SEC. Most of them are going to SEC schools. You see the best players in the country portaling out of other places. Guess where they're looking? They're looking to go to the SEC. It just means more in the SEC, folks. That is not some bullshit slogan meant to like make A&M fans belong to something. It's the truth. Sports mean more in the SEC than they do in most other conferences. Dish Falk holds around 7,000 people, I think. I don't know what the record crowd is. I think obviously probably bigger than that. I never understand how a stadium holds X amount of players or X amount of people, but somehow there's records that are thousands and thousands of people more than the capacity. But let's talk about capacity. Mississippi State, they've recently dumped $68 million into their place. That place holds 15,000 people. Alex Box and LSU's a 10,000 plus. We're talking stands out in the outfield. Texas has that occupy left field group that I think they used to have a bus that they would drive up behind the fence and stand on a platform. Now I think there's like this automatic scaffolding thing that lifts people up there. Could be wrong. But I think, just again, going back to trying to compete with these programs that Texas is going to have to compete with for players, tradition-wise, they got it covered. The only team even close to them is LSU. And close, I just mean, I'm not saying they're above LSU. I'm just saying those two teams, if you look at them on the surface from a SEC perspective in two baseball seasons when Texas is in the SEC, there's not any programs that are close to those in terms of tradition. But there are some schools that are pretty far ahead of Texas, I feel like, with facilities. So I'd like to see Texas not only try to figure out a way to help these guys get some more NIL money. The other thing about NIL is you can keep some of these guys, some of these bubble guys that they can't decide what to do. The money's tempting. $450,000 is a lot of money, especially for someone that's never had any money. But what if, I don't know what the slot for that is, but you get drafted X place. It's not great. The slot's 450. You feel like you can come back and do better for the next season. Wouldn't it be great if the NIL group for Texas baseball could get that kid $450,000 so he doesn't feel like he has to make a decision about his future based on money? And wouldn't it be great for the University of Texas? Now, I cannot complain about the money they throw into the football program. The University of Texas absolutely has sold out under Chris Del Conte to try to get the best football program, the best environment. the best of everything they can for that football program. And I know that's expensive. And I know as an athletic director, as a business person, you have to make choices. You can't spend all the money that you don't have at once, right? You got to space it out over time. That's how it goes. But I would really love to see Texas kind of dump some money into Texas baseball, catch it up with the rest of some of those higher echelon SEC programs in terms of facilities, money spent, etc. Join us later this week. We'll talk about recruiting. We'll update some recruiting stuff that's been going on with football. Talk about the wide receiver / tight end rooms for the University of Texas coming up. Talk about the Wyoming matchup in Game 3. Subscribe to the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. Check us out at horntakespodcast.buzzsprout.com. Subscribe from there. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, please. Click on the bell and get notifications there. You can find me on TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook at Horn Takes. Email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your comments, questions, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. You guys have a good Tuesday. Book them.